really the study in the therapy world of sex addiction and even the term betrayal trauma, which is what I was experiencing, which at that point, nobody even said that word to me yet. But they were identifying that my husband had a sex addiction, but they didn't still know a whole lot about it because that was just had names put to it in 1990. And so it was still in its infancy of being discovered and the effects that it has on the brain and how it rewires their personality and how they show up and what it does to those around them, the effects that it has on their loved ones.
Welcome to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we discuss all aspects of parenting using the foundation of understanding personality dynamics to raise independent, responsible, and resilient children. My name is Karen Wagner, founder of Teaching Our Youth and the Parenting Blueprint. Let's dig right in with today's topic and have some real talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches. Well, welcome back to Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches, where we have honest conversations about real challenges of parenting and the hope that really carries us through. And today, we're going to be diving into a topic that hits close to home for so many families, including mine. But what happens when addiction and betrayal shakes the foundation of trust? How do we begin to rebuild, not just as individuals, but as parents guiding our kids through this pain? Today, I'm joined with Parenting Blueprint coach Rosanne Delaney, and some of you may remember her from previous episodes, but she knows this journey firsthand. Rosanne and her family have walked this hard road of betrayal, healing, and restoration, and today, she and her husband are helping other families find hope, safety, and connection again. So if your family has been touched by hurt or you're longing to find a way to move forward, this conversation is definitely going to be for you. So let's dive on in. So Rosanne, I am so grateful that you are here with us today. But for the families who may not know you yet or may not have heard your story, can you share a little bit of your personal journey and what then led you, after all that you had gone through, to be willing to be open to support other families that are walking a similar path?
Sure. Thank you for having me. This is really an important topic because it is so prevalent, much more prevalent than any of us really believe, because in the moment, part of the process is that you feel isolated. You feel isolated with shame. You don't want anybody to know exactly what's going on in your family. There's anger and resentment, and you don't know where to find help. And so oftentimes it's just easier to pull within and to isolate. And that is not helpful. And that is not the path to healing. And so our journey starts long ago. We were married in 1990 and we were young. He was 19 turning 20. We were married in September and his birthday's in October. So he turned 20 in October and I had just turned 19 in July. And so we were very young and in love and Twitter pated and feeling all those feelings. And I guess, truth be told, really just looking forward to having sex because we both come from a very Christian, conservative background where you wait until you're married. And, but my husband brought into the marriage a secret that he had been keeping from everyone since he was a young boy.
Wow.
The more therapy he does, we're getting closer to about the age of 6 or 7, where he was first introduced to pornography. And of course, at that time, when he was first introduced, it was just very, he was intrigued by it and the feelings that it brought up in his body, because at that young of an age, they don't have any idea what they're feeling or what is happening. But what he did know is that he had just lost a sister to a heart defect, and he was very close to her. And the family was dealing with her death the very best they could, but it wasn't healthy. It was now that she is buried and in the ground, we're not talking about this anymore. It's done, it's over. And in the 70s, therapy was for the really crazy, right?
Right.
It had not become accepted into mainstream yet as to something that is good for everybody to partake of during hard times to help them navigate all of the feelings. And so he was introduced to pornography, and that was distracting him from all of those feelings he was having from his sister and her loss. And, as life progressed, pornography kind of stayed a constant. Now we need to remember it's different then than it is now. Our kids are walking around with porn in their pocket. Now it's easy to access. It's free most of the time. He had to really either go to the local drugstore in their small town and steal it, or go to the library and look at art magazines of nudes. He even talks about the JCPenney catalog and the underwear models and different ways. And so, he had to be a little more resourceful than people have to be really this day and age. And so this progressed all through his childhood, into his teen years, and into his young adult. And then he met me, and we had great chemistry. I think our brokenness from our childhoods was a bonding factor as well. But I was not aware of his struggles with pornography. And quite honestly, I was naive enough that even if he had mentioned it to me, I may not have known what he was talking about. But I did find out slowly over the years. And my first indicator was on our honeymoon. And, your honeymoon is supposed to be this beautiful night. It's supposed to be tender and sweet. And my sweet husband, his only reference to sex was what he saw in pornography, mostly at that time through like VHS videos that he could go to the video store and rent and hide and watch. And these videos, they're not sweet and soft. They're forceful and violent. And that was his reference to what sex was. And it was very scary for me, and it hurt, and it didn't feel loving. And I was really confused and didn't know what was going on. And even, this is going to sound really harsh, but I actually felt violated and raped by my own spouse. And on the way home from our honeymoon, we had gone to Yellowstone, and we were driving home, and we were in Idaho at the Indian reservation to get gas. He said we needed gas in the car. And so we pulled over for gas, and then he went inside to pay. And as he came out, I could see he had something stuffed up his shirt that he was trying to hide. And he went around the back of the car, and he opened up the trunk, and I assumed that he put it in the trunk because when he came and got in the car, it was no longer there. And I really didn't know what to make of it or think of it, or even did not have the wherewithal to even say, hey, what was under your shirt? Right? Mm-hmm. And I found out later that it was magazines like Playboys and things of that sort. I really don't know which magazines it was. And that doesn't matter. It was just pornography. And over the next couple of years, it would show up here and there. In our marriage, I would find videos I would find things would happen that just didn't make sense. Like he was going to school full time and I was working to support him at school. And he had a job at the university where he worked in one of the labs. And all of a sudden he wasn't getting paychecks anymore, to find out that he was coming home and watching movies while I was at work, and pornography while I was at work, and acting out. And I should have asked you this before. When I say acting out, that means masturbating. And pornography and masturbation go hand in hand. You typically don't have one without the other. Right. And we had been married 2 years and had our first child. And that's a story for another day, the trauma that goes into bringing a child into the world when you have a partner that's not present. It's like physically, emotionally present. He was physically present, but not emotionally present. But when she was about 2 years old, she was playing around with his backpack, his school backpack, and opened it up and pulled out a magazine and a video and is like playing with them. I was mortified. And that was probably the very first time that I had the wherewithal and the chutzpah, for lack of better word, to like address it with him. And that was the first time that I was really gaslit by him. And he came back and made it about me. And that, first it was, I wasn't seeing what I had seen and what I had held. And when I was able to disprove that to him, then it turned into, well, if you would be more agreeable in the bedroom and we would have sex more often and this and that and the other, then I wouldn't need to do this. And it was about me. And these are very classic gaslighting and deflection from their own actions, their own shame, their own, all of the feelings that they're feeling. It's very often that they turn it back onto the spouse. And these patterns continued for years and years. And eventually I woke up one day and I didn't even know who I was. I didn't even feel like I was living. I felt like I was a hollow shell of a person, just doing the movements of life. And by this time, we had 3 kids, and I was pregnant with number 4. And I was ready to leave him. I was ready to just be like, okay, I'll figure out how to raise 3 kids on my own, and I'll have this 4th baby by myself. He can't be there. It doesn't matter anyway. He's never helpful or supportive in labor and delivery. And I will just move home with my parents, which was scary in and of itself because I had not felt support from them, because in their way of helping, the few times that I had talked to them, their response was, just try harder, Rosanne. Don't give up on your marriage so easily. And I can look back now and see that came from a place of love of some sort, and also a place of not really understanding what I was going through and the mental abuse that I had been taking on. And so it was scary to even think that I would go into that environment, from this abusive environment to this other abusive environment, even though my parents weren't trying to be abusive. They felt they were being supportive, right? Just a lack of understanding. And I ended up staying. I made the choice that I had already figured out how to handle and navigate the crazy town that was within my marriage. And I didn't have it in me. I didn't have the stamina and the wherewithal to move my kids and to move myself and have to figure out a different environment and how to navigate that. And so I made the choice to stay. And we had number 4. And during that time, our clergy leader at the time, I had gone to him and said, I'm leaving. And he was like, well, let's try this first. I've been made aware of a therapist that works with sex offenders at the Idaho State Prison. And he understands sex addiction. And this would have been 1999. And really, the study in the therapy world of sex addiction and even the term betrayal trauma, which is what I was experiencing, which at that point, nobody even said that word to me yet. But they were identifying that my husband had a sex addiction. But they didn't still know a whole lot about it because that was just had names put to it in 1990. And so it was still in its infancy of being discovered and the effects that it has on the brain and how it rewires their personality and how they show up and what it does to those around them, the effects that it has on their loved ones. And so he said, why don't we try therapy with this guy? And so every week I'm pregnant and find babysitters for my kids. And we drive 45 minutes from Burley, Idaho to Idaho Falls to meet with this therapist. And I was hopeful. It lasted 3 months. We did it for 3 months. And I kept telling the therapist, Sean's lying to you. He's not telling you the truth. And the therapist would say to me, I think you need more counseling because I feel that he is being honest. And what happens is that these addicts become master manipulators, even to the point where he could manipulate the trained therapist.
Professional. Yeah.
Yes. And so now I was being abused and victimized by my spouse and re-victimized by the therapist. Not on purpose. Let me make that very clear. It was still a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. However, it had big effects on me as well. And so we kept moving on through life. And baby number 4 was born. And we tried to change our environment. We moved to another place, and my husband got a different job where he wasn't working a night shift. He was working a day shift and hoping that that would help to make a difference. And it did. For a couple of months, he was able to white knuckle through his addiction. And then a stressor would come up and he would fall back into his addiction and binge really hard and then show up in really horrible ways, like really hurtful ways to me and to the children. He never hit us. Some addicts do. We were lucky in the way that, or in the fact that he did never physically harm us, but he was very passive aggressive. And that's very emotionally taxing on children. And on me, along with the gaslighting continuing over and over that made me feel like I was bat shizzle crazy. And I was the one with the problem, not him. And, our kids grew. And every 2 years, he would go through this cycle of white knuckle, not looking at pornography. A stressor would come. He would fall off the wagon. And so let's move and have a change of scenery. And he would move us every 2 years. And when we finally got to where we live now, our oldest was starting high school. And I said, no more. I had no idea that this was an addiction cycle at that point because there wasn't good therapy, a good understanding. Addiction cycles hadn't really been identified very clearly yet in the therapeutical world for sex addiction. And, but I told my husband, I said, she's starting high school. We can't move anymore. Like, if you want to change jobs, that's fine, but you have to find something local, even if it means you're like the Walmart greeter by day and flipping burgers by night, or vice versa. We can't do this to her now that she's entering high school. And of course, the cycle continued. And until the day of reckoning, the day that I finally mustered up inside of myself enough courage and strength to speak my truth. Now, you know, we're both Christian women, and so God is important to us. And I need to point out that for me, I know that God was in the details. He was leading and dropping crumbs of information in front of me leading up to this day of reckoning with my husband. A few months earlier, a neighbor and friend of mine had confided in me that this had been going on in her marriage, and that there are now, she didn't even know it was happening in my marriage. She was just like sensing some discomfort from patterns that she was seeing in how my husband and I interacted, and it feeling familiar to her. And so she was brave enough to say to me, hey, this is happening in my family. And they now have specialized therapists called certified sex addiction therapists, CSATs. And this is the gentleman that we're working with, and she gave me his name and number. And I never divulged to her that it was happening in my family because I was still so full of shame, and I didn't want to make my husband look bad. And even though she was telling me this is happening inside of her own marriage, and she just left that there very kindly for me. And then a little while, maybe a couple weeks later, she said, hey, there's a group for women, and it's a support group, and I go to it every week, and would you like to come with me? And I was like, no, I don't think I need that. Because in my head, I was still under the impression that if my husband got fixed, if he quit looking at pornography, and if he became the godly man that I knew that he could be, then everything would be better. Like there was nothing for me to do. And so I declined that invitation. And she made that invitation a couple of more times before our day of reckoning, and I declined as well. Then one Saturday in November, we were helping my sister and her husband move. And I had noticed that during downtimes while Sean was waiting for like instructions or being asked to do something, he was on his phone a lot. And it was like turned so that nobody could see really in close. And I wondered, was he looking at pornography? But I didn't really want to know, but I did want to know, but I really didn't want to know. And so I didn't ask, I didn't try to look or what have you. I didn't make a big deal out of it. And the day went on, and my sister and my brother-in-law had felt like everything had been wrapped up enough and thanked everybody, and we were getting in the car to leave. And as we were starting to pull out, my brother-in-law came out and he's like, wait, stop. I need Sean one more time. I need his muscles. And it was to help him move their shed off of the pad and onto a trailer. And so I said, okay, well, I'll just wait right here while you go and help him. And for some reason, I don't even know why, I did not have my cell phone with me. And so as I'm waiting and I'm bored, I thought, well, I'll just jump on his phone and jump on his internet browser and log into my Facebook and scroll Facebook while he's helping my brother-in-law. And all I did was swipe his phone open, and there it was. He hadn't even closed out of it. And I had it in my hand again. And our youngest had just left for college at the end of August. And this was November. And I was like, I don't need this anymore. I am tired. I am so tired. And I am so broken. And I'm so disconnected from my own self and from my children and my friends. And I don't even like you, Sean. Like, I love you. I hate you. I love you. I hate you. Like, it was all inside of me. But at that point, it was like, I don't have any littles at home. I don't need him. And so when he got back into the car, I turned the cell phone and said, tell me more about this. And he was like, I don't know how that got on there. And I'm like, wait. This isn't going to work anymore. We don't have kids at home that you can blame it on. Nobody's had your phone but you. And just to be clear, I was not snooping. This was just there when I opened your phone up for me to log into my Facebook to waste time while you were helping move the shed. Like, don't lie to me. I'm done. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with you making it about me. And he still tried to deflect and gaslight me. And I had to keep saying, no, this is not about me. Now, I believe at that moment, God took over. Like, he took over my mouth. And I said to him, you know what? A friend in our neighborhood, and I didn't tell him her name because that was none of his business. I said, a friend in our neighborhood a few months ago told me that this is happening inside of their marriage as well. And that there's these specialized therapists now, and she gave me his name and number. And so I pulled the paper out of my purse and I gave it to him. And I said, here, what you do with it is up to you. And how you move forward and what you choose to do now from here on out will just be information for me to know what I need to do next for myself. In the past, I would have been the person calling our clergy and making an appointment for him to talk to our clergy and confess to him. In the past, I would have been the person calling the therapist and making an appointment for him. But I know God had to have taken over because I didn't commit to that. And God knew the only way for him to truly lean into recovery and repentance and restoration was for him to decide and him to do it. And so on Sunday, on Sunday, which was the next day, he came home from church. We came home from church and he said, I've made an appointment with the bishop for this afternoon. And I was slightly impressed, but like, not really. And because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, good, he's going to go talk to the bishop and he isn't going to tell him the full truth of it. And he's going to make it about me. And, because she doesn't this and she doesn't that. And she's not meeting my needs, this, that, and the other. I had to do this, like poor me. And so I was slightly impressed, but not really. And the next day he went to work and he called me in the afternoon and he was like, hey, I just got off the phone with Adam Moore, who was the certified sex addiction therapist that our friend had given me. He said, I talked to him for a little over an hour on the phone and I have an appointment for Wednesday, but he suggested that it would be important for you to come along. And of course, inside of me, I immediately was like, oh, I don't want to go because the last time a couple decades earlier, the therapist was manipulated and by my spouse and his addiction and everything was turned back on me. And so I didn't really want to go, but I had this feeling inside of me that I should. And so I leaned into that feeling and I agreed to go. And so on Wednesday, we drove to the therapist's office and we went in. And the first thing the therapist said was, I'm so glad you came, Rosanne, because I want to hear from you how this has affected you. And I was like, wait, this isn't how this is supposed to go. But in that span of time of 19 years, they had been studying this addiction and found also that the spouses or partners experienced something that they had named betrayal trauma, which is a form of PTSD. And he was giving me a safe place to share my experience. And he said, now we're going to focus on you for the first little bit of our therapy. What? We're going to focus on me. And what he did was he set up that we would meet monthly, and Sean would meet with him individually once. Then the next week, I would meet with him, and then we would meet together as a couple. And so Sean was doing his own therapy, starting to understand sex addiction and what it was doing inside of his body, and how the hit of dopamine from watching pornography shows up in the brain like a hit of cocaine. And it is that addictive. And what it does is it actually rewires your brain, the circuiting inside of your brain. And if you think about it, it would have to. Like a committed partner, I knew my husband loved me. In the most unhealthy, backwards, crazy kind of way, he loved me. But this addiction from the time he was young, in his formative years still, into, at this point, middle age. Like he was almost 40. No. He would have been closer to like 43 at the time. Had rewired his brain and had also desensitized him. He couldn't feel empathy. He couldn't feel sympathy. A lot of those very key emotions that are the reason we don't really do terrible things, right? If you have empathy for human life, you can't kill people, right? If you have empathy for your spouse, could you show up in ways of infidelity? No. And the pornography, the viewing, the continued consumption of pornography and viewing of pornography had rewired his brain. And it needed to be unwired and put back to his divine wiring, which is what we find out in the parenting blueprint. And at this point, we hadn't even been introduced to you or the parenting blueprint. And I also needed my own healing because I had to develop certain coping mechanisms that just kept me standing and being able to move through life, not in a healthy way, not even in a very clear or present way. But my kids were fed, they were dressed, they showed up to school with socks and shoes on, and their hair maybe done, but maybe not perfect, but nothing that would alarm the teachers. Things were like not right in our home. So I was able to do those basic things because of the coping mechanisms that I had developed that had built this shield of protection around me. And, I needed my own work too, as much as I didn't want to admit it. And I reached back out to the friend that gave us the number to the CSAT and let her know. And she again invited me to go to group with her to the women's support group. And I again declined and said, can I please just get through the holidays? Like, I don't want to be a mess through the holidays. I know I'm not showing up the best, but I want to at least be able to show up because I was really worried that going to this women's support group, I would just like fall apart. And what I found was when I finally went to that support group, I didn't fall apart. I left empowered because I was sitting around the table with a bunch of other women who were like, oh, yeah, you are not crazy. Yes. And they were sharing their stories and lending me their hope for their own healing. And showing me that someday I would actually be grateful for this experience because the woman that I would become would be so much better. And I remember saying to them, that'll never happen. There's no way that could ever happen. And they're like, oh yeah, just keep coming. Just keep coming back. And they would end every meeting with, keep coming back. It works when you work it, and I am worth it. And they would lend me their hope when I had none. And right across the hall, my husband was meeting with their spouses in his own support group. So we were going to therapy once a week, and we were going to our support groups once a week. And these are 12-step support groups, but for sex addiction. And SA is a support group, a 12-step support group. We actually didn't attend SA. We attended SA Lifeline, which is called SAL, and you can find them online at salifeline.org. And they have meetings in person everywhere, and they have them online as well for the addict and for the betrayed. And going through the 12 steps, I affectionately call them the atonement for dummies. Because in my Christian background, I knew what the Savior did. I knew what Jesus did in Gethsemane and him dying on the cross, and that he was atoning for our sins. But what I missed was that he was also atoning for the hurts that we feel from others, and that he had already taken that. And I didn't need to carry it, but that I needed to have faith and trust in him and be able to surrender all of my hurt, knowing that he had already taken it and already carried it, and that he had given me that gift. But I also had to learn new healthy coping skills to start making new healthier patterns in the way I interacted with my husband, with our children, with my parents, my siblings, people at work, with anybody that I interacted with, because his addiction and the betrayal that I had experienced had infiltrated the relationships in every aspect of my life. And they had in his as well. And so we had a long journey ahead of us. In fact, the journey is so long, it won't end until we die. But what I want to share with you today is that we are in November. It will be 8 years, 8 full years since we started this journey. And we have a marriage that is now starting to thrive. We're not just surviving. Now, sometimes we are, right? Because we're still learning and growing. Sometimes we do feel like we're surviving, but there's a whole lot more thriving happening within our marriage. And even within our relationships with our children, they are beginning to thrive and have a healthier dynamic, a healthier polarity in the way that we interact with each other. And we didn't do this until our children were grown. Our youngest was 19. Our oldest was married and had just had a baby in August of that year that we started this journey. And at the time, I felt my knowledge at that time was that I had done a good job and the kids had not suffered from this. And if Sean and I were to heal, things were going to be good. But that was only part of the equation.
I know. Yeah, I was
Our
just going to ask you
children,
about that. When you do have this addiction and betrayal and it enters the family, it isn't just about the couple. It impacts the whole family system. So, can you share a little bit, because others may be able to connect with that? What was that ripple effect? What did that look like in your family? Because now you've got a different perspective. You can look back and say there were things going on. So, how did that affect your kids as well as you?
for sure.
As you were going through that, because parents, we want to think that, like you had mentioned earlier, and I've experienced this in my life, I'm going through the motions without emotions. I'm just doing the things I'm supposed to do to take care of my kids, getting the meals, getting to school, doing all the things, because I don't want to address what I'm feeling, because if I do, I'm going to fall apart. And so I stayed in that lane for a really long time, for a period of my life. But did my kids see through that? And so what your kids saw, especially with your daughter opening a backpack and pulling out a magazine and a video, and she may not even have known what she had. But I mean, now things are starting to happen. So what did that look like for your children when this was still in the depths of it?
Yeah. I am sure that there are even aspects that I'm not aware of
Mm.
yet on the effects of my children. But what I am aware of is that they were experiencing their own betrayal. And not only were they being betrayed by their father and the way he was showing up or not showing up, along with me. I could be my best mom. I did not have the emotions with them when they were feeling them. They were too big. They were too big for me to hold. And so I was not able to teach them how to move helpfully through their own big emotions. And a lot of it showed up in me trying to sit with them, then getting really uncomfortable and not being able to do it, and then saying, hey, why don't you go to your room, and when you feel better, come back out. And oh, it breaks my heart, because that's what my parents did to me. And I'm sure, I don't know that this was part of their story, but I do know that in generations prior to me, a lot of people didn't have the capacity because they weren't going to therapy. and 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 they didn't. And so it was just go to your room, or go for a run, or go work out, or whatever, like whatever you have to do to move these emotions that are uncomfortable for you and uncomfortable for me. And I can't help you work through it. With their dad, he would show up very passive aggressive. And so we were all always walking on eggshells. Like, I would have friends that I would be at their house and their husband came home and they'd say, okay, I just heard the garage come up. Dad's coming home. And the kids would, dad's home. And the kids would be like, daddy's home, daddy's home. And he'd come through the garage door and the kids were like, all of them, daddy, daddy. And they were so excited to see him. And I was like, these people are crazy. Like, it's not that big of a deal when dad comes home. But was a healthy dynamic. In our house, I was like, dad's home, and everybody was like, psh, scattering. And the anxiety was coming up because we didn't know what was walking through the door. We didn't know if Jekyll or Hyde was going to walk through the door. And we didn't know what was going to set him off. For instance, oftentimes, the kids were old enough to be able to help with the dishes. And so they had some jobs, but I did not have the capacity to argue with them about whether their job was done or not. Like, I was like, I will just get to it later. Even though I'm depleted, I will just do it later because I don't have the capacity to fight with them to come do their job. I did not have the emotional capacity or even the physical strength to have those arguments or discussions with my children to teach them the importance of, as a family, everybody needs to contribute to the chores and the jobs that keep the household running. And so if the dishes weren't done, very often my husband would come home from work and he'd go right into the kitchen and he'd be like, whose job was it to do the dishes? And everybody's like, no, nobody's going to say whose job it was, right? And he then all of a sudden dishes would be starting to be clanged together and the dishwasher thrown open and cabinets thrown open and slammed shut. It's fine, I'll just do it. And just this real passive aggressive behavior that for small children and even for me as a grown-up woman is scary. And emotional abuse. And I didn't have the words for that at the time. So it's been really a hard process for me to learn that there was so much I didn't know and to give myself grace, that I was showing up and doing the best that I could in the situation I was in. But it still hurts my heart so terribly to think that these children, elementary age children and smaller.
How do you explain that to them? So you may have experienced some behavior as they were coping with that whole dynamic. So you and I both know that with what we do in coaching parents, that there's always a root to that. And how do you address that? And when it's not just the behavior, but how do you, there's the trust and the safety that is shaken in that process. So how do you address that? Or maybe is that part of your restoration? Or as you said, your kids were kind of grown and flown when this finally all came to a head, and this had already been a part of their life for a period of time, and then they went on. But did you find that there was a trust and safety that was broken in the process of what you were dealing with? And how did you bring that back? Or are you still working on that?
Great question. Absolutely, trust and safety was broken. Our poor children should have been their safe place, their soft landing. And it wasn't. It wasn't. It showed up in big emotions.
Big emotion,
yeah. It showed up in bedwetting. It showed up in them learning to hide and have secrets from us as parents because they didn't feel safe to share things with us because neither one of us were in a place emotionally where we could show up in the way that they needed, nor did we have the skills. Really, the way my kids were showing up was a response to how my husband and I were interacting with each other, interacting with them, and how we were showing up. Right. And it was how they learned to navigate this really prickly world.
Yeah.
This really unsafe world that was their home. And I thought I was doing a good job. Like I was an involved mom. I was in the PTA. I was in their classrooms. I was showing up to their sports things. And, I was checking all the boxes.
Right.
But I really wasn't showing up for them. And it's really hard still for me to hear some of them talk about how they just really couldn't wait to get out of the house and get on their own. Because not even them really knowing exactly how to navigate the world as an adult still felt safer than trying to continue to navigate it within our home. And that is heartbreaking.
That is heartbreaking. So for parents who are still maybe in the thick, or your story is connecting and relating with them, what would you tell them about the hope and the possibility of rebuilding? Because as you were going through this healing and restoration of your own, I'm sure there was a key turning point. And you shared a lot of that in that story where you came to this point where were not. And it was the invitation to attend and you saying no, or in the denial, or not wanting anybody to know that this was really happening. So you did have a turning point in your story. And it was after your kids were gone and you were still finding that he was hiding behind this when you found this on the phone at that time. But you guys have made some changes, and you shared a little bit about what that's looking like for you now. But for the parents who are still in the thick of that, what would you tell them about the hope and the possibility of rebuilding? Because I am sure, and I know you're working with families now, that there are going to be some couples like you that are both committed and dedicated to work through this very, very difficult restoration. But then there's others that maybe one is in and the other one's not quite as committed. How can you bring hope to those?
Oh, for sure. You need to remember, and it's hard with my husband and his recovery. Before that day where God took over, I was controlling his recovery. I was making the phone calls to make the appointments. I was reminding him, hey, you have therapy tonight, all of those things. And I had to learn to give up control, which didn't feel safe, which was the beginning of my own personal journey,
Right.
of reclaiming myself. It wasn't anything I did or said, even no matter how hard I prayed. My husband still had his agency to choose.
Yep.
If he wanted to be rid of his pornography addiction and his sex addiction, that had to come from inside of him. I could not control it. And that was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But when I swallowed that pill, that's when I started to thrive.
Yep. You had to let go that you can't control what he does or how he recovers, but what you needed to do was take care of you.
Yes. And then no matter what he chose, I was going to be okay.
Yeah.
I was going to come out on the other side okay. Whether we were holding hands as we walked through that fire in this storm together, or whether we walked through it separately, I was going to be okay.
Yeah. So that does give, hope to those who feel as though they may be with a partner that they've been living behind that facade like you had, and then trying to introduce or seeing it and then being gaslit that there's something that you're doing. And I can see how that is a defense mechanism, right? It's not me, it's you. And that's the easiest way to go about doing it. And then recognizing, as you said, it's not me, it is still them. And then heal yourself, even if you have to separate from that, as hard as that may be, but you become whole. You need to become whole yourself, which you and Sean are both becoming whole separately, obviously through your therapy. He's working, you're working, and then you're working together, which sounds like a beautiful thing that I'm sure you're bringing into your program now as you're helping parents through this. But let's get back to the kids a little bit, because you had 4 children living through this. And when we first met, you were coaching children, you were coaching teens, and then became a certified parenting blueprint coach. But I know you're building this into your program now. So how is the parenting blueprint approach helping families that are navigating through these hard seasons of life? How are you using that tool? Because the children will be affected in one way or another. And as you said, it may not bubble up until later in their life, where that trauma came from, and it'll show up, and then we'll start to see like, there was a root that comes back from a period of time. So how are you using this tool to help parents navigate?
Yeah. Well, what we found in our own recovery process through therapy and through our support group is we kept feeling like there was this missing piece, but we didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until we had been going to therapy and to our support group for about addiction journey And it really resonated with Sean. And so we started looking into, like, what is a coach?
Right.
And what is a coach's role? And he decided to enroll in this coaching program with this coach. And it kind of like dipped our finger into it, and we found it very helpful. Therapists diagnose and treat.
Right.
And you see them once a month. Mm-hmm. And you're in there with them, and through the process of them diagnosing and treating you, we found ourselves the day after therapy going, now what was it that he told us that we should be working on?
What am I supposed to be doing here? Yeah.
Yeah. To then contact for support between the times we met with our therapist. And it kind of left this gap.
Yeah.
And in reality was slowing us down. Not that the therapist wasn't good, right, and wasn't a vital part to our healing, right, and recovery. But what we found is that coaches meet us in the here and now. Right. Like our therapist was looking and helping Sean find the root cause. Let's go back. Let's find the root cause as to why pornography became so important and such a necessary coping skill for you. And let's address that. And the therapist was busy doing that, where a coach would meet us where we are today and say, here, where are you at today? What would you like to work on? And where do you want to go? We had continuous EMDR and trauma modalities that took Sean back through his childhood, all of the traumas that he had experienced, from the loss of his sister to the way his family dealt with that and showed up around her loss, to bullying on the bus, on the way to school. This was helping him navigate those and helping to heal those, where the coach was meeting him where he was. Right. And if some of those old things were showing up, the coach could help him work through strategies to, how do I work through this, and how do I move forward, and what skills and tools do I need to put in place to move forward? And then we found, when I started coaching, that a woman's coach actually showed up for me in the same way. Where are you at today? And so it was like this missing piece for us that had been missing. Now we had the support from the past and finding the root. Now we have the support in the here and now and where we want to go. And we had he had his tribe that were addicts and recovering and in various stages that he could also turn to for support. And because they were addicts, they would call him out on his bullcrap. He couldn't lie to them.
In a way that no one else could, because they've been there. That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I had my support group of women, my tribe, my sisterhood, that I could reach out to and say, Sean showed up this way today, and this is what's happening inside of me. Yeah. And they could help and support. They would be so empathetic because they knew. And then I could bring that to my coach. Right. And so we found that it really was kind of a four-legged stool. Yeah. We needed to have the support of a therapist. We needed to have the support of a coach. We needed to have the support of our people that have been there. And we needed to have God. And if one of those legs of the stool was missing, life didn't feel sturdy.
Right.
And so we both went to coaching school and became certified coaches with an emphasis in addiction, sex addiction, and betrayal trauma. But of course, I started with young girls or with teenagers because I knew the statistics. I knew that 90% of men had admitted to consuming pornography, and that a little over 63% of women also admitted to consuming pornography. What that told me was there were still people who weren't admitting, that were still hiding. So the numbers were higher. Right. So it meant I could stand in the grocery store line waiting to check out my groceries, and the chances of the person in front of me and the person behind me going through the same type of thing in their marriage was really high.
Wow. That's some scary numbers, Rosanne.
Yeah, scary numbers because the access is so easy. And it increased during COVID. We saw a huge increase because of the stressors that came through COVID. And this is still young enough in its journey of being studied therapeutically and understanding what it does to the addict and what it does to the betrayed. And now they're studying what it does to the children and bringing that into it, that there are still people out there that aren't aware of the terms, the terminology, that this is an addiction. And there is betrayal trauma. And you have a form of PTSD. And of course, you've been showing up the way you've been showing up. You've been through your own literal war.
Right.
And children don't come out of it unscathed. They see it on a parent consuming porn, and that's confusing. And then they're gaslit or even told, don't tell your mom what you saw. And all of these things affect the whole family system and moves it from a healthy state to slowly to a very toxic, unhealthy state. And so what has to happen is safety has to be established within the relationship first. Mom and dad, you have a responsibility to your children to get healthy. Because they're not going to have the verbiage or even understand. Right. Because to them, it's their normal responsibility to heal yourself. And then if you can, heal your relationship. And once that has happened and safety and trust is starting to be reestablished within your own self and hopefully within your relationship, then you can move into helping your children. Because I had, and Sean, we both had to expand emotionally so that we could hold our children's emotions now in a safe place that we helped to create so that we could sit with them and actually hold that. And even if it felt uncomfortable, and even if shame was coming up inside of us, we knew what that was. And we knew how to put it aside so that we could sit there and listen. So we could acknowledge to our children that, yes, that happened. And validate their experience that it wasn't fair and it wasn't right. Wow. And be able to then ask them questions from a meaningful place to help them continue to explore why these feelings are showing up, all along demonstrating that, you know what, we've done enough.
Rosanne, this is powerful stuff. I just want to tell you, this is powerful, powerful stuff. This is probably one of the most powerful episodes I think we've ever done, if I can say, because this is a very difficult topic to address that I think a lot of people hide behind the shame and the guilt, and they don't know where to turn. So for parents who are feeling hopeless or unsure of where to start because they're connecting with your story, what is the first step they can take towards healing as a family? Because I know you and Sean are working with families now. So are there some ways that they can connect with you? Are there any resources that you can provide to them that may start conversation to start healing? So where can families go, parents who are feeling hopeless, on where to start?
Our whole goal is to provide support and hope for healing. And when you have no hope, we want you to borrow our hope. Lean on us and borrow our hope for better days, for healing. And you can do that by following us on Facebook or Instagram at Lifting Relationships. You can visit our website, which is www.liftingrelationships.com. You can reach out to us through a Facebook Messenger or Instagram Messenger, or email us at hello@liftingrelationships.com. Will be held the strictest of confidentiality. We never will use your name or share your story with anyone unless you choose that you want to.
Want to share your story. Yeah.
Yes.
So powerful information. So you can follow Rosanne and Sean on Lifting Relationships. Just look that up. Instagram, Facebook. You can reach out hello@liftingrelationships.com if you want to reach out privately to Rosanne, and she'll get back to you and be able to at least open a conversation and dialogue on being able to provide that restoration that you may be looking for. And Rosanne, I just want to thank you. Number one, this is probably one of those powerful episodes we have done. I think a lot of people hide behind guilt and shame of what they may be experiencing in their relationships, and knowing that it's impacting their families, but to not know how to get off the slippery slope they're on because we don't want anyone to know, or this, or our partner is in denial, whether it's the man or the woman that this is happening, and all that you have gone through. I am just so proud to know you. I am so proud of what you and Sean are doing and opening up a very difficult topic that I think so many people may be experiencing. And I've often mentioned you, even as a parenting blueprint coach, that this is what you specialize in. So when families are going through whatever trauma and addiction that may be, because when we first started working, it was just trauma and addiction, and you were working with families on that, with the family, with the parenting blueprint, to help parents build that trust and relationship back with their children. But I didn't know the depth of all you have been through. So we restore the family, we restore the couple, whether they're able to restore that and become a healthy couple again, or they just may need to part ways. But then how do we restore the family and the relationships with our children using that parenting blueprint to really be able to reconnect? And so what you and Sean bring to the table is such a holistic approach to healing and restoration. And having the faith base is something that's very important to me, because there are many things that I've gone through in my life that if I did not have my faith and my relationship with my Lord, I would have been in quicksand and I've been sinking fast. And so the fact that you bring that to it as well, because I don't know how people do it without it. That's all I can say. I don't know how people can do it without it, but that's my perspective. So I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and transparent today. If you, our listeners today, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and share this. If there's anybody that you know that may be struggling behind the scenes, just share this link with them, because there is a lot of the hurt that's going on in our society, and we hide behind it. And because we have access, Rosanne, as you said, so easily because of digital devices, and it's not like you need to go to a video store and buy a video. It's not that you can go buy a magazine anymore. It's in, like you said, porn in your pocket. And it makes it so easy. And it is such a slippery slope that really affects, as you said, Sean's wiring of his brain from a very young age. The fact that you shared that he was so young when he was first introduced, and how long of a period of time that was, where we know any addiction, whatever the addiction of choice may be, is a rewiring that was embedded in him for such a long period of time, that's all he knew. That was his only coping mechanism. That's what he knew. And the courage to admit it and recover, and then have the foresight to say, husbands, fathers, we can help you through this too. And you can restore and have the healthy relationships that you desire. It's going to be a lot of work, I am sure. But if you would like to learn more about what Rosanne and Sean are doing, please connect. We'll have the links below this episode. If you feel as though you want to share this with somebody who may be going through some things, please do, because what they're doing right now is just remarkable. So Rosanne, I'm going to give you last words here.
Just remember, there is hope. There is hope for healing. Focus on yourself first. Then you can make the decision about your marriage once you have some safety, trust, and clarity of mind back. And then let's pull your children in. It doesn't matter how old they are. safety and trust and restoration of your relationship with them can happen even once they are adults. And you can have the life that you've always desired. Mm-hmm. Just getting there is going to look a little different than what you had probably planned. Yeah. And that's okay. There are people here who have walked the path before you. We continue to walk the path. We continue with our own therapy, our own coaching, and our own growing, and we will never stop so that we can continue to show up healthy for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and for other families. There is hope. Start here. That'll begin your journey. Just reach out. Just reach out. We're here to walk with you.
Rosanne, thank you so much. Oh gosh. So those of you who are listening, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this episode with those of you who feel maybe hiding behind some shame and guilt and they're just falling apart, inside. As Rosanne was saying, just going through the motions. It affects every area of your life, not just your marriage, your own self-esteem, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your family, the relationship with your community because of what you're dealing with. So Rosanne, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today, and for the hope that you are going to bring to so many families. So thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of Real Talk with the Parenting Blueprint Coaches.
Thank you for being here.